Hey everybody! I don't know where that came from. What was that? Wish is Stephanie! Meow! I said that in reverse. Deal. Hey, I am filming from my hotel room in Madrid, Spain. Hola, ¿qué tal? Right, so this is a very different video and I think I want to do more of these, even though I haven't even finished the first one. I want to review a podcast, a language learning podcast, a specific episode. I've been meaning to do this for this specific podcast for a while now, and before I could even get to the first one that blew me away 2 weeks ago, the first episode of I Will Teach You a Language by Olly Richards, boom! He publishes another one, which is even more incredible, or equally incredible in a different way. Okay, in order to talk about Olly Richards' episode with Stephen Krashen, which is available in the comment. I'll leave the link both in podcast form on I Will Teach You a Language podcast, as well as he made it into a video because it was taped at the Polyglot Gathering, not the Polyglot Conference that just finished in Iceland, but the Polyglot Gathering that I believe happened in Toronto earlier this year. Okay, here's the deal. I have an academic lens on this. Stephen Krashen. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Dr. Krashen. I don't know. I'm going to send this review to both Olly and Dr. Krashen because I am so intensely thankful for both of you gentlemen for making this available to the world in a way that is accessible, appealing, interesting, and relevant. The fact that you two sat down together, and excuse me, the rest of you guys, I'm going to talk to these two gentlemen for just one moment. The fact that you two sat down and created this bridge between academia and the polyglot world or the language learning world or whatever you want to call that group of folks is phenomenal, necessary, and timely. And I am beyond excited that this has happened. It probably happened before this interview, before this conference, it started to happen, right? But what this podcast episode proves is that the silos that we believe that exist between these two camps do not need to exist forever, and they can change, and you two are helping that change. And my goodness, I could not be more pleased by this, and I'm almost speechless. And if you've seen any of my other videos, or even just look at the times of my other videos, you understand that I am wordy, if nothing else. And for me to be speechless is not an easy thing to do. So I want to thank both of you for that. And now I'm going to go into reasons why I absolutely loved this episode. So I'm going to talk to everybody over here again. Hi guys, thanks for sticking with me on that one. I have such a personal connection to this episode. In my grad school, I read a lot of Stephen Krashen's work for my, it was a master's in teaching English as a second language, but it was within the program that was connected to the PhD program of second language acquisition and theory, which means that we studied a lot of how American academics view language learning. In my mind, every pun intended, that was a head meets wall experience because meaning frustrating, because I had spent about a decade in Asia teaching language, and I thought I could add my 2 cents to these classes and bring in my practical knowledge, and it would add something to the conversation. But the theory and the practice did not go well in those academic classes. There was plenty of room within the program for me to do what I wanted to do with my love, which is writing and studying second language learners and their writing process. So I am very, very thankful for that. And I had some amazing mentors within the program. So I'm not critiquing the entire program. I'm just saying how many second language acquisition academics were presented and analyzed in said program, and I've heard other programs as well, was a bit of a turnoff. Stephen Krashen was one of those people. I find this amazing now because after listening to this interview, I I can find little threads of things that I have a slightly different viewpoint on, but his main theories, which they do go into in there, in the interview, his main theories throughout the years are incredibly sensible and practical and make utter and complete sense in the real world of learning languages. So I cannot for the life of me remember why I was kicking and screaming while reading these articles. I'm sorry, Dr. Krashen, if that seems mean, but there's something about how this was presented in this context which didn't bode well with practice. And I don't know why that is. So what I want to do in this video is I want to talk through the things I absolutely loved about this interview. But I want you to know that this is all the more positive of a review because I went into listening to this interview with that lens of resistance from my grad school experience with second language acquisition theory, of not wanting to hear people talk about it. But because I had heard Olly's previous podcast that had blown me away, I thought if nothing else, he might push the limits of asking questions that would be intriguing and interesting and move the conversation along. And he did. But what surprised me the most is I don't disagree with what Dr. Krashen was saying at all. I mean, not at all, but I mean, I'm floored by how much we have in common with what we think about language. Floored. I don't know how I didn't latch onto that in grad school. I seriously don't. This is only 2012 to 2014. This was not that long ago. So I don't know what happened, but I just want to tell you that lens was there, which makes this super positive, you must listen to this interview review, all that more positive, if that makes any sense, because I went in thinking I was going to cringe the entire time, and I listened to the interview twice in the first week, and I might listen to it again, because there's so many nuggets of wisdom and of things I wanted to follow up on that I didn't make notes of because I started just listening and got lost in the content. So take that for what you will. That's my disclaimer of the lens that I came to this interview in. Okay, so for some of the things I'm going to mention, I have the times in the interview, but I think you should listen to the whole thing. There we go. So at 7 minutes and 12 seconds, they talk about language learning and people that are good at music. And I don't want to ruin that for you because it surprised the heck out of me what they said about their ideas on the connection or not non-connection between being good at music and being good at languages. I think you'll find that interesting. At 9 minutes and 21 seconds, Krashen talks about TPRS, and I don't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but TPRS, and story methods, using stories to teach language. I have a agree and disagree moment on this. Agree is, he also talks about compelling content and stories, narratives, creating a conversation. He talked about Linda Lee. He took a course from Linda Lee, if I remember correctly, and she engaged her students in creating a story and asking questions and helping with vocabulary. And that was the way that her students learned. And there's also a very interesting story on Krashen taking the course, and I don't want to ruin that story for you, but it was very surprising how humbling and real. I mean, Krashen is huge in academics, in the academic realm, and for him to be this humbling and honest and share his success and failures in language learning is so appealing as a language learner who feels like she's done nothing except fail at learning languages. I appreciate that honesty more than I can say. So those story methods, right around 9 minutes and about 9.5 minutes, right around then is when he talks about those. So that's the agree moment, is the compelling content of stories to learn language. The disagree moment is it sounded like he was hinting at it being the method that should be used, and I think language learning methods vary with personality, with goals in the language, and with that point in your life and what works for you then. And I think I've talked about these quite a bit, but I think there are some people who do just pick up language by listening to it. There's people that pick up language by seeing it. That's me. I'm very, very visual. And there's people that pick up language by having to kind of force it in and then use it and it sticks. That's also me, depending on the language. And so it depends on the language too, probably. There's a lot of factors is what I'm trying to say. And I don't think there's one method. And if there's anything I learned in over a decade and a half of teaching language, it's that there isn't one method for everybody all the time. It's so variable. And that's what makes it so incredibly hard to make resources for language learning, is that when you make one resource, you're including some folks that will benefit from that, and you're excluding a bunch of folks that won't. And then you change and you do this. And then if you try to go too big, you'll exclude almost everybody, because then it's not good enough for any one group that might need that thing at that moment that way. It's so infuriating. So, and it's also difficult as a language learner, knowing with that language at that time in your life, with the resources you have, what will work for you, for your goals. It's so complicated. So I do resist the implication of there being a way to learn a language at any given time. I do appreciate Krashen saying that there is a limited role of grammar. He talks about, hold on, let me find the time. At 20 minutes and 30 seconds, the ability to speak is the result of listening and reading. So he talks about massive input, listening and reading, and that speaking is the result of that. So basically, this is what I'm trying to do with Chinese right now for me, because the tones are so hard and I'm a very visual person and I failed so many times at learning a language. Yes, I'm going to make this personal. I'm going to make this about me because I am the lens for this channel, inevitable as it is. So I really liked that this was said out loud, because languages are so hard for me. I want to get listening, and reading the visual Hanzi characters, the ones that attract me into the Chinese language. I want to get comfortable with those, and then the speaking will come. I'm not pushing my speaking, as can be very evident from the 3 phrases that I have known for months and months and months, and I have not built on them. I even had a dream the other night that I was talking to somebody about learning Chinese, and I was able to read a bunch of stuff for them, and then they started to speak to me in Chinese, and I had no conversational ability, and language shame washed over me. But I hate that. Forget it. Why have it? It comes when it comes. And I like that he was basically saying lots of input and then it will come. I like that. Is that everybody? I don't know. I don't know anymore. I feel like what I knew about language learning went out the window every time I tried to put it into a general assumption. So I don't know. Does it work for a lot of people? Probably. Do we give up too soon because it's so hard and we expect too much early on? Bingo. I think that's what happens. Olly Richards talks about, and I really like this term. Olly, I don't know if this is your term or somebody else's, but I love it. Self-directed way. He says that language, a lot of polyglots learn in a self-directed way. I've been struggling with how to explain to people that I'm learning Chinese via, before the book the graded reader that I'm working on now, I was using a lot of mobile apps. I was using a lot of websites, an online course, a brief online course. And I was trying to say I'm teaching myself, but that's not right, because I was using everybody else's resources. But self-directed way is good. It leaves it open to, yes, I'm using all of these people's resources, but I'm planning my learning and I'm directing my learning. So I love this phrase, self-directed way. Love it. Where did it come from? I don't know, but I love it. Krashen talks, I have mentioned before that I think that some people are more naturally inclined to be able to use languages better, quicker, faster, blah, blah, blah. Krashen says he does not think this. He thinks everybody has the ability to. It's more a matter of your filters coming up and down, your affected filters coming up and stopping you. He actually calls, where is it? Oh, there's a couple of things he said about filters coming up. He had some very interesting stories about his own filters in French and how it stopped him from communicating just because he got really self-conscious about using the language in front of a certain audience. Success phobia. At 17 minutes and 35 seconds, he talks about success phobia and an output filter. I think you'll find that very, very interesting. I find that when I'm in Spain now, and I'm using basically a very elementary level of Spanish, and when I'm using it here with people who are just random people, and I'm using it with them, I'm comfortable sounding like a 4-year-old just learning a language, and I'm choppy. I don't inflect my verbs a lot of the times. I'm missing articles. I'm doing all kinds of things. I cannot for the life of me do reflexives. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm totally comfortable with that. There is a language group in Shanghai I'd really like to go to, and I'm super self-conscious about using this level of Spanish with folks who seem to be really fluent and comfortable in using languages other than their first language. Success phobia? Maybe. Embarrassment phobia? Maybe. That's my term. Well, it's not mine, but it's not what he said. He said success phobia. So I think there's a lot to the filters that we put on things. And if we just relax and use language for what it's meant to do, which is to convey meaning, that is a much better way to go. So to continue on with the limited role of grammar, sorry, I left that idea. When you get that input with listening and reading, Krashen was saying that if I understand it correctly, that the grammar comes with the repetition. And so you'll pick it up that way. Instead of in the grammar boxes that we study in the books, you'll get it from usage. I have had students that really can't cement inflections and different things unless they see them in those boxes. So I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I think it can be. And maybe it's just that they think that they can't use it until they get it in their head, in those boxes, in that way that resonates with them. But I have known students who have to have that visual. And I get having to have a visual. In order to remember somebody's name, if their name is not something I've heard before, I have to ask them how to spell it, and I will write it in my head, and I'll keep it there. If I forget to do that the first time I meet them, I will never remember their name. And then I'll be too embarrassed to ask them again, because I'll be like, I've known you for 6 months, but could you spell your name for me? Yeah, that's awkward. Awkward. I have done it, but yeah, it's awkward. Krashen talks about, since he doesn't think people are naturally inclined to learn languages or not, he thinks that the two things polyglots seem to do, or people that are comfortable with learning languages seem to do, two things: knowing how to learn languages and doing a lot of it. Knowing how to learn languages and doing a lot of it. I don't want to say it again, but I'm really big on repetition. And I think knowing how to learn languages for me has been one of the biggest hurdles. I've been able to tailor things to my students over the years, and I've seen them progress, which has been I've talked about before, one of the most frustrating things. I've been able to tailor things to help my students, but I haven't been able to tailor them to help me before this channel, before this attempt at learning, before this learning of a language that I'm doing with Chinese. And so far, despite the you should be farther along voice in the back of my head, so far, if nothing else, it's kept me motivated for months and months and months, which I generally don't do with languages. I give up much sooner than this. So knowing how to do it has been very hard for me. Sticking to it, doing a lot of it, has been easier, but it's the knowing how and keeping that motivation going. That's been the hardest part for me personally. No. Oh, them talking about natural language ability, having and not having it, is about at 16 minutes. About 16 minutes, 16:15, that kind of thing. So Krashen talks about learning about the polyglot community, his theory on comprehensible input, how that seems to be confirmed with the polyglots that he met at the conference, about 26 minutes and 23 seconds. And I think you'll find that very, very interesting. Him comparing the theory with the practice that he's seeing people talk about and use, the methods that they're using and all that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting, again, to see academia and language learning practice in the real world collide. This does not happen often, people, at least not to this point. So this is monumental, and I really want to stick an expletive in there, but that's not what I do on this channel. So I'm gonna resist, but I really want to stick it in there. I really want to emphasize how amazing this is to have these two folks in these two worlds colliding. It's fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, what else? There's a tolerance of noise and ambiguity that they both talked about in this interview. And I think if I have to bring everything back to this language learner, which I do, that's what happened with me. Thank you, Somia. That's what happened with me with coding last year, is that you have to get comfortable with not necessarily knowing what everything you're using in the code is doing at every given moment. You eventually do, I imagine, once you get very, very good, but at first you're experimenting, you're changing some things, you're moving some things, and then you test and see if it worked, and if it works and you don't know exactly what everything is doing, but it works, you kind of move on because you've got the goal of having this thing work. So if it works, you don't necessarily have to know what everything's doing, but you want to eventually in the end. And I'm comfortable with that because there is an end goal, and in the stuff I was working on, it was a visual end goal on a website and a database, and I could see the end results. That tolerance of noise and ambiguity that they were talking about in this interview with language, I'm still not comfortable with. That's why I keep spending 3 weeks on each chapter in my reading book, which is ridiculous. I feel like I have to internalize each sentence, which would be the equivalent of memorizing, by the time I get to the 25th lesson, by memorizing the entire article. Who would do that when they read something? So I'm going to take this comfort level with ambiguity and tolerance of noise. And tolerance of noise, they're talking about being comfortable not, one of the things they're talking about is being comfortable with not knowing every word that you're hearing or reading. Oh, that makes me crazy. Because I got to a rather high level of vocabulary in English because I used to read so much, I'm very uncomfortable with singing words I don't know in a language that I'm learning. I'm getting better at that, but I need to get a lot better at that. I'm going to apply this to my reading practice, and I'm going to switch from when I feel comfortable, I'll move on to the next lesson, which is turning into like 3 weeks per lesson. There are 25 lessons just to read this one article. I need to move on. So I'm going to start doing 1 week per lesson and just move on. Whether I'm fully comfortable with the lesson I'm on or not, I'm going to move on because I can come back and review. And it can make more sense as I go on, and I can get comfortable with the tolerance of noise that they're talking about in this interview. And I think that would be more helpful than going as slow as I'm going right now, because I'm starting to lose a little momentum, and that's not good. And it's 25 lessons to build up to reading one article. That shouldn't take 3 weeks times 25. No. There's graded readers, and then there's going so slow that you lose motivation. I don't want to do that. So there's that. Compelling input, having important, interesting things that you want to do and learn and experience with the language. Getting so caught up in the content that you forget it's in a different language. That's what Krashen said at one point, that you forget you're using another language to get there. That you're reading something because you want to read the content, and you want to get to the end of the chapter and the end of the book to find out what happened, and you kind of forget that it's in another language. Yes, because language is meant to be used, not just to be played with. Now, I like playing with language. I like graffiti because it plays with language and it's written and meaning form. It's also a visual medium, but a lot of people play with text. I like wordplay. I like comedy. There's a lot of things I like with language. I like language blends, like confidence and coffee together, confidence. I love that stuff. But you generally used to convey meaning, and it's used to get somewhere. Get there. you know? So, I mean, there's more. There's plenty more. There's so much goodness in this interview. It's ridiculous. And it's ridiculous in the best of all possible ways, But I can't recommend this enough. And Olly Richards' I Will Teach You a Language podcast is worth a listen, if not many, many listens. And this particular episode or video, whichever form you listen or watch it in, is just wonderful and significant, and hopefully a trend towards the two realms, as if there's only two, but let's pretend that there's two. The realm of the academics studying language learning and the realm of people in the real world studying languages. Let's pretend that there's two, that those two worlds colliding and more so working together to help people think that they can learn languages. How awesome would that be on a long-term basis? There's so many ideas swirling around in my head right now, but I think I've said them before, and I want you to hear Krashen and Olly talk about this instead of me talking about it. So I think you should go to the links below, and you should listen to these things, and you should get in contact with these folks. You should go to polyglot conferences. You should learn a language. You should. Now I'm saying should, which is the one word I think should not be used in language learning because there's too much of a pressure. And pressure is the one thing you don't need with languages. Motivation, inspiration, communication. But pressure? Throw pressure out the window. Goodbye, pressure. Hello, Krashen. Hello, Olly Richards. Dear God, this is an amazing interview. That's all I have to say. And I gotta stop now because my phone's gonna cut me off in about 3 minutes. I have so much on this phone. Anyway, I would really, really like to hear your comments on what you think about this podcast, Olly's podcast in general, your experience reading, if you've ever read Stephen Krashen's articles or books. He has all of them free on his website, apparently. So if you are interested in what he's saying, feel free to go there and look at his stuff as well. All right, I have rambled on enough about this. Olly Richards, if you are watching this, my goodness, your podcast is amazing, and you are creating many, many good things in this world. And Stephen Krashen, whatever resistance I had towards your writing, I apologize. I don't know where it came from, but just wow. Thank you for inviting this polyglot world into the academic world and whatever you're going to do with it in the future. Thank you. This needed to happen, and it's so exciting to watch this happen. Okay, I'm signing off from my hotel room in Madrid, Spain, on vacation. This is my vacation. This is what I do. All right. Zaijian. Ciao. Adios. Hasta luego. And since it's like 10 o'clock at night, buenas noches.